to get something from the presentation. So don't feel intimidated if you don't actually know PHP or if you've never really done any programming. But it is really targeted at people who know a little bit about developing. Everybody starts from nothing. So, when I first started writing Moodle plugins, it was really the first PHP I'd written. I'd written, other languages before, but I hadn't really worked with PHP, and that shows in some of the early stuff that I wrote. But everybody starts from nothing. So it's a good place to start with this presentation, because when I started, there really wasn't this sort of thing available. So it's a good opportunity for you, I think, or I hope. Just to kind of get the ball rolling, it would be nice if you could just type in the little chat area there if you have done any developing before, or if you have done no developing before. Could you just type that in for me? Okay, good. All right. So there's a good range of people. It looks like most people aren't actually developers as such. That's fine. Okay. Nothing worthwhile. Yeah, Stuart, I don't believe you at all. Okay. All right, well, let's get on with the show. We've only got really 30 to 45 minutes, I think, so I don't want to waste too much time on fluff. I'm going to just go through and talk. It's a similar presentation to one I gave last year, but last year I think I got bogged down talking about, things that people didn't need to know right away. And I'm a big fan of just-in-time learning. So until you need to learn it, there's probably not much point in wasting time trying to learn it. So I'll skim through much of it, but the presentation is actually available for download in the course for this particular presentation on the iMoot website. So you can actually download the PDF and actually look at the slides in more detail if you're interested. Okay, so these are some of the plugins that I've written for Moodle. There's over 30 of them. Many of them aren't on the plugins database. That's because either they're ones I wrote for people who didn't want them released publicly, or I haven't taken the time to prepare them for being released, or for some other reason. But there's a number of them, and there's many different types of plugins in Moodle. There's over 40 plugin types if you include sub-plugins for things like assignment submissions. And I've done a range of them. So when I first started, I made all the mistakes that everybody makes. So I really kind of learned the hard way, I think, in those early years. But as I've gone through and made later plugins, I think I've gotten better and better. And I feel that there's a lot that I'd like to tell somebody like me, in the situation I was when I first began. So please ask me a question if there's something you don't understand, or if it's something I haven't covered. Okay, so as a framework for writing, plugins, Moodle is actually really quite advanced. There's a lot of things in Moodle that you won't find in, the other more boring kind of CMSs out there like Joomla and WordPress. Some of the things that we do have in Moodle at quite a high level are user management. So passwords, getting passwords sent out to you, assigning capabilities, and so we can say what certain users can see and what certain user roles can't see. Navigation, logging, backup and restore. There's APIs to backup and restore. Forms, so getting data from users. File system APIs, so writing to this file system, getting it back, determining what people can see and what they can't. Background tasks. This is something that's quite new, but it's really quite flash. So you can set things to happen in the background when people aren't even using your plugin. For example, when the forum mails out notifications that people have replied to forums that you're interested in, that's a background task. Database APIs. So in many cases, you won't actually need to write SQL. You'll just kind of look at the database API, and you'll just enter in the information that you're interested in, and that will come back for you. Capabilities, so you can determine who can see what, and this is really popular in big institutions. And internationalization, so Moodle is really advanced in the way it handles turning your plugin into French or Spanish or Japanese or something like that. So because you've got all this at your fingertips, it's really good. You can do a lot, but the flip side of that is that you have to know how to do all those things, and that's really that's really overwhelming because there's just so much to know. And this is why, I mentioned just-in-time learning before. I think that's really relevant here. I think until you need to know about logging or about background tasks, I don't think you need to go out and learn about them. So let's move on, since that's what we're talking about, just-in-time learning. For your development environment, well, there's two broad streams of how people go about writing their plugins. We've got IDE, which is like a whole a desktop software that we use for debugging and coding and looking at the source code. The popular ones are Eclipse, NetBeans, and PHP Storm. The other method is the low-level method where you just use a text editor, probably a programmer's text editor, and that has a few features, like it highlights the text for you, and it shows you which is the closing bracket for your opening bracket and things like that, but doesn't have all the features of an IDE. The benefit of using a programmer's text editor is that it's very simple and quite fast. The benefit of an IDE is that it's got a lot of features, in particular debugging, but it's quite confusing, and sometimes you spend more time figuring out the IDE than figuring out how to program the thing that you're programming. It's up to you which you choose, which you use, which you prefer. I prefer the programmer's text editor. That's just a legacy of the fact that I was always programming from different locations when I had a teacher's job. Couldn't always take my IDE with me. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. In Moodle, there are some settings which make it quite useful for you when you are a developer. Under the site administration, development, and debugging area, you can turn on debug messages to a high level, or you can turn them off to none if you wish. If you check the little checkbox beneath that for display debug messages, then those error messages will come to the screen. So that you won't have to go to an error log to see them. You'll actually see them on the screen. That can break some things in production, but in development, that's actually the fastest way of doing things. I'm sorry if my audio, I can see some people are complaining that it's dropping at times. I don't think there's much I can do about that from my end. Possibly it's my connection or your connection. But I'll just soldier on. I apologize if that's the case, though. Another thing is that Moodle has a lot of caching going on to speed things up for you. That caches JavaScript, it caches styles, CSS styles, caches language strings. So sometimes when you make a change, that change won't be reflected on the right away, and that's because what you're seeing is being served up from the cache. So you often have to go to this particular page and purge all caches. It is possible to turn off caching of certain things. For myself, I generally just keep the purge all caches tab open, and I just keep purging things as I change things. Okay, so how to start? Well, there's so much to incorporate into a single plugin that it's really not, I don't think it's not practical to start from scratch and start just creating files from nothing and then building them. You really need to start with an existing mod or to use a template. And I'll talk about templates more shortly, but an existing mod, if it's very close to what you're doing, it's quite a fast way of getting started. Depending on the complexity of that existing mod, it might actually be you might actually be shooting yourself in the foot by starting with something that's so that's got so much code in it that you don't need. You really have to use your judgment there. In most cases, I would say using a template is better. And I'll talk about templates shortly. So the process is generally you download the template or the similar mod, you rename it, then you install it, and you fix up any issues, and then you start modifying it. There's always a few issues. You always miss one or two things in the rename process, but that pops up with an error here or there, and you just kind of fix that up. As you do it a few times, you get quite familiar with that. Okay, so here are some templates. There's the activity module. There's two of these available. There's the first one, which is the Moodle HQ one, and then there's one which I use, which is just my own one from my own from working with activity modules quite a bit. I've added a few things here and there, and I think it's probably a better place to start than the Moodle HQ one. So that's the one we'll use today. The question type. So if you're making a question type, there's one there. The block, if you're making a block, or an Atto plugin. That's another template of mine. If you're making a plugin for the new HTML editor in Moodle, which is called Atto. Atto plugins are actually quite a good place to start because they're usually very small and there's not a lot of code in them and not a lot going on. They often don't have any kind of database interaction. They just deal with the text that's in the text area. So that's actually a good place to start if you want to. So how to rename? Well, you'll use, don't do it by hand, okay? It's really not a good idea. Although it's recommended, sometimes people talk about it, or you can use a command line. There's a command line there, which is talked about sometimes, but I also think that's just not for mortals. That's for really other people. The best way is to use an IDE or a programmer's text editor, and they usually have some feature for working through a directory and changing a piece of text in all the files in that directory or nested in that directory. So that's what we're going to do today. I don't want to spend too much time on understanding, although it is important, just because we're limited for time, and I don't want to bog us down in details. But we should understand a little bit, so let's quickly cover some of the basics. So the contents of a plugin look a lot like this. This is the database activity. It's a core activity in Moodle, and it's got a number of these files. And most of these files you'll find in other plugins too, plus certainly activity module plugins, and these cover a lot of different areas. So I'll just quickly give you a greatest hits. I know there's a cool kind of pen tool here, so let me see if I can use this pen tool. Yeah. So styles, there we go. So if you put CSS styles in here, they'll be picked up automatically by Moodle. You don't have to do any loading or anything. When your plugin is on the page, your styles have also been loaded. So that's a cool thing to have. Backups, this is backup and restore, so all your backup and restore logic goes in here. Classes, this is where you put classes that are to be auto-loaded. Moodle's got this auto-loading feature of classes. I won't cover that today, but it's pretty cool. DB, a little bit of a misnomer here because there's a lot going on in the DB folder. This is where you declare events that you're interested in listening to. It's also where you set permissions and capabilities. For admins can see this, or teachers can see this, but students can't see this. And it's also where you set up your database to be installed or to be upgraded. Language, this is where you set your language files. Pics, this is usually where you put just the icon for your plugin. Module.js, this is where you put all the JavaScript. So if you're a good developer, you keep your JavaScript in a separate location, and Moodle loads it in its own fancy way. So you put that in Module.js. You probably noticed sometimes that when you're using Moodle, that some things seem to happen right at the end of the page loading. So the page loads and it loads and it loads, and then finally the button for editing or adding an activity becomes active, or finally the video starts to show. And that's because the Module.js is loaded at the very end after everything else is done. If you do it the Moodle way, you'll just save yourself trouble later on. Mod form, this is where the settings for your plugin for each instance are done. Local live, this is where you put just basic code that you need to add, stuff that's specific to your module. Live.php, Moodle goes and loads this when it wants to know what your plugin does. So if it knows that if it wants to know if your plugin has backup and restore capability, or if your plugin has kind of reset all, when somebody resets a course, reset all capability, when it wants to know what your plugin is all about, it goes to live.php and looks for certain functions. So that's quite an important module. Index is actually not as important as you might think. It just loads a list of the various instances of your plugin. Edit, this contains the settings form. Render, this is quite important. This is where all the output for your module should be displayed on the page. So in the old days, you just load the data from the database and then print it to the screen all in the same place. But these days, you're supposed to separate that display logic so that it goes in the renderer file. And the benefit of that is that later on, when somebody else wants to change how your plugin displays things, they can actually override your renderer file from their own theme. And so you don't get a call at midnight saying, the people in our blind school can't access your stupid widget because it's not accessible. That they can actually do that themselves without contacting you, and they're not fussed when it upgrades because they haven't actually edited your plugin as such. So that's a good thing to use as a renderer file. Settings.php, this is where the admin settings are set up. So this is what the admin sees when they first install your plugin. Version, this is where Moodle gets version information. And view.php, this is the page that actually Moodle loads when it displays your plugin when somebody clicks on it in the course list, in the case of a database activity. So much of the rest of these slides are actually to do with explaining in more detail each of those particular files, but I want to move on really because I don't want to waste too much time on that. I think what we've covered there is probably enough for the most part. Now I'd like to clear my screen. How do I do that? I go like this. Cool. All right. So let's just skip on by these next few. Version.php. Okay, we talked about that. One thing we should just mention is when you have a plugin, every plugin has a component name, and they call it the Frankenstyle component name, and that's the plugin type with an underscore and then the plugin name. So if it's an activity module like the database activity, or like the quiz is an activity module, they start with mod underscore and then quiz, or mod underscore and then data. If it's a question type, it'll be Q type then underscore and whatever type of question it is that you are making, whatever the name is you've given it. If it's a filter, it's filter underscore and then the name of your filter. This is actually really important. It's very, very basic, but once you've set your component name, it's the key to everything. You can't really change it. So if later on you want to go and change it, it's really a hassle. And if some people have already installed your plugin, it's going to be a real drag because there's no way to upgrade your way out of the situation because the component name is a part of that. And I've been in this situation before. So although it's a very simple decision, it's quite an important one. So make sure you get your plugin, your component name correct. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through some of these slides because we've talked about much of this. Please go back and check these slides later if you're interested in what each of the individual files really does and what why you would want to edit it. Okay, let's talk about globals a little bit. So globals contain important information that you're probably going to need, or even functions, and that you're going to need as you're developing your plugin. So these are the globals. There may be more. These are the ones that I'm aware of. The top three are the most important, really. The CFG is config, DB is database, and user is the currently logged in user. So, for example, with the config, you want to get the URL of your Moodle site, which may not be the URL of your actual site. They may have like a Moodle subdirectory or something. For example, DB contains all the functions that you need to access the database. So that's really, really important and very useful. Very few activity modules wouldn't have a database component. So that's something you'll definitely be using. User, so this is where you get the user's name or the user's ID. And it's also good because you don't have to pass around the user ID. You just get the person who's logged in, which is quite good for security. It means people can't kind of pretend to be another user and get their report or something. If you use the user object, you're kind of safe from that sort of thing. I'm really talking like a motor mouth, so I hope I'm not kind of losing people. Just ask me a question or something in the chat area there if there's something that I haven't covered or that's not clear or that you want me to talk about, or if my accent or my pronunciation is bad. Okay, this is the config global. This is some of the information that you might need from here. The www root, this is the URL of your website. The dir, is that right? That's right, yes, I think. Yes. The dir, that's the path to the Moodle index directory on the server's file system. The libdir, that's the path to the lib directory, so the Moodle's library directory. The data root, this is where the data is stored. So you know that Moodle stores its data in a different location from the program. So if you need to know the path to that, that's in the data root. The temp dir, so if you need to write something into the temp directory, then that's the temp dir. So this is some of the information that you'll need from that global config. Okay, and the database one, this is where you get record or get records or update a record. You do this via the DB global here. And actually, if you have a look here under this user object equals DB get record user array ID equals 2, that's actually there's no SQL, is there? You just kind of pull that from the database API. So that really makes coding quite fast, and it abstracts away any kind of differences between MySQL or Oracle or SQL Server. So try to use the DB global if you can for these things. And here you've got user array ID equals 2. Beneath that's a better example here. DB get records. And here we're using the global user object to get the user's ID. So that way we don't need to know, we don't have to pass around the user's ID from anywhere. We can just pull it from this global here. Okay. Let's move past here. Okay, here's some useful links. The most useful link of all, actually, I just realized it's not actually listed here, but that's the link to the Moodle forum, the developers forum. That's the best place to go. There's a lot of really talented developers in there who answer your questions, even dumb questions they answer. They're really good. When I first started, I didn't get much luck from posting questions in the developers forum, and I think I was probably actually just a little bit unlucky. But I think now there are just more people on there, and there's a couple of people who are really bend over backwards to help you. So it's much easier than it used to be. And if you have problems, rather than kind of nut it out by yourself, really just go in there and start asking questions. That's the best thing to do. The developer docs are there on the main on dev docs moodle.org.dev. The forms API, that's one I'm always on a lot, just checking how I can get a select box onto the screen, or getting the sample code for how to get a select box on the screen. The data manipulation API, so where you want to know what you can actually do with that database global we saw before. How do I actually get that get records? What do I actually pass in there? If you go to this page here, that gives you all that information. The output API, when you want to know how to write, some HTML to the screen, how do you format that? How do you, add a CSS class? It's very small, but the Moodle information is here. Output API, output components. But on the right-hand side, I find this xref. I find just looking at the source code for the various output components is a little bit easier. I think the Moodle docs for the output API is still not really up to speed. You can't complain about that, because somebody would just say, well, why don't you do it? And that's a good question. So, yeah. Okay, well, let's do it. So enough talk. Let's let me actually go through and show you how to rename a template and how to install it as a new module, and let's see what that does. Okay, I'll keep my eye on the chat at the same time. It's not a very noisy chat. I can see not many people asking me questions or talking amongst themselves, but feel free to do that. I've got the chat open in another window, so that's something we can do. Occasionally, I've had problems when I screencast with Big Blue Button, but I was testing it last night and I didn't have any problems, so I think we're okay. Yes. Okay, so let's try sharing my desktop. Here we go. And I'm just going to share a region. Link appears to 404. What link is that, Judith? Oh, the new template. Oh, it does it. Okay, well, let me show you that anyway. I'll have to fix that up. Sorry about that. Should be getting just think I allowed this last night, so it should actually happen. Let me retry that. Retry. Once I get my screen showing up, I'll actually show you that. Yeah. So thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's the best place. If you just go to github.com/JustinHunt, you'll get the you'll actually see it there on the top page. It's one of the more popular of the repositories. I have never actually introduced it to anybody. People just kind of found it actually. So that's good, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to start sharing now. Here we go. I'll reduce my screen to a smaller size. It's really small. I'll go over here. Okay, so here is my the template. Okay, Moodle mod new module, and I'm not quite sure what's gone wrong with the link that I put on there, but clearly it's wrong. But if you come here, you can download the module on the. It's going to cause some grief. You can see the download zip. This is the link here. Okay, moving my Windows around is going to be a problem. But these are the instructions here, and basically after we've downloaded the module, we want to rename 4 things. This new module new module here, this mod new module underscore, this new module lowercase, then the copyright notice. So those are the 4 things that we want to rename. And here I've actually I'm going to call it Wee Widget. I've already kind of renamed the folder. Let's just quickly go in and have a look at what their file looks like before we edit it, so you have some idea. Okay, and you can see here where we talk about what the module is called, or what the Frankenstein component name is. I've got this new module at. I put this through all the files. So here you can see when we're getting the course module from here, or when we call a language string, in place of the actual course module name, I put all these little placeholders here, mod new module Frankie. So these will be replaced when we go through and do our little search and replace. The reason I recommend using this particular new module rather than the core one is because I put everything in here that I actually use. Yeah, that's right, and exactly. So when you're renaming a module which hasn't got a very specific name, it's really tricky. So something like I'm trying to think of a good example, but maybe quiz. If that would not be a good example to actually to try and modify and make your own version of. But quiz, the quiz could be anywhere in there, or yeah, just be very careful with some of those ones. This one, new module is very generic, and in actual fact, there are parts of Moodle that are set up to ignore something called new module just to make it easier for you. But what we have here is we've got a renderer PHP, which the core new template doesn't have. We have reports. I put a little reports section in there, so you get reports out of the box, so you can get going with that. I put capabilities. I put here in the task here, I put a scheduled task, so you can run a background task. So all of these things that these days you'll probably commonly need to do, they're already in there for you. And if you choose not to use them, well, there's no stress. You just don't have to use them. So that's why I think this is probably a better option than using the core one. Right, but let's go through and do the rename. Come on. Enough talk. So this is Notepad++, but any of your text editors or IDEs will have a similar feature. So you go to search, and here we have, it's not going to show me. You go search. We've got find. Sorry, I'm jumping all over. On full screen. Here we've got find in files. Okay, so that's what we want to do. And I'm already started, but let's just be sure of the job. So we widget, this is the direction in which I put the plugin. And first we're going to change, what was it? At new module to the uppercase name of our module, so we widget. So let's go back to our thing here. And we'll change at new module at to we widget. And we're going to replace some files. And I put match case here because we should be case sensitive. Okay, there's only 3 of those, so that's good. That's correct. We go back here. The next one is mod underbar new module underbar underscore with our module's Frankenstyle component name and the trailing underscore. So let's go back to our thing here. So it's mod new module underbar. I'm going to replace that with mod we widget. Okay, replacing the files. There's a whole bunch of these. 141. Okay. And the next one is at lowercase new module at. We're going to replace it with a lowercase module name. So let's go back to our thingy. That's at new module. I should really make a script just to make this a bit easier for you. But you know, if you really do abstract away all of this stuff, people don't actually know what they've ended up doing, which just doesn't really help them. Okay, replacing files. There's a whole bunch of these too. 330. Okay, and finally the copyright notice, because you don't want everybody thinking that I wrote your module. That wouldn't be good. So let's change the copyright notice. Let's change this to 2015. Justin Hunt. $31. Okay. So we're nearly done. We're just about out of the woods. Let me just check this. The we widget module is a mod module that will end up in the mod folder, right? Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so it's an activity module. Yeah, that's true. Certainly, when you're first doing this, you want to actually check that the change has been made or that the change is correct. What I really should do is document it a little bit better, because I do know that it should be 3 of the first one, 140 or so of the second one, and 330 or so of the third replaced. So yeah. Good. So anyway, we're not quite out of the woods yet. There's another little task we need to do. That particular search and replace won't change any file names. We do have some file names which actually have mod modules still hard coded in there. So we're going to change this one here to we widget. Okay. This is the bit that I always forget. And then Moodle complains. Now, I did actually want to go through and make some changes to the module after we installed it, but I probably think we're not going to have time to do that. So let's just install it and see if it installs properly. And I'll walk you around, what it actually is doing a little bit, and then you can ask some questions if you wish. Okay, so in the backup folder we have a few things to change. Also here in the classes folder we have a few things to change. Here in the task, as I mentioned, we have an ad hoc task all set up for you. And a scheduled task will set up for you. Okay, one more change we have to make, and that is to the language folder. Here, the language strings are all going to be loaded from a file called wewidget.php, so we need to change that also. All right, good. So we're done. So now we just need to upload that baby, and we're good. This shouldn't be doing this, but what's going on there? Let's just say no. Now, so you want to upload this we widget into our directory of our server. So let me do that for you now. Come back to my chat, see if there's been any messages. Okay, so it's gone in. Right, so we should now be able to go to our module and install it. So let's, here we go. Here's our course, and the course is called How to Cook Fish. And the site, we need to go to the site notifications area to get our plugins check. It should detect that we've got a new plugin there, and it does, widget activity. So let's go through and install that. Yeah, I think what Anne is talking about there is like if you use camel case, where you have lowercase and uppercase letters in the same kind of word in your plugin name, it's just like kind of, yeah, it's going to cause you problems. So just keep it all lowercase. I use uppercase purely for things I'm going to swap out or for constant names. I use constants a lot, probably too much. So that's why I have those uppercase new modules and things like that. Okay, so we actually have a setting. I set a default setting in there so that you can follow how you get a setting from the admin screen, from the admin settings page, all the way through to being able to use it in your render.php. So we have a setting here called default text. So let's just put this wee widget. Let's call this mighty widget because that's us. Mighty widget from admin. Okay, it's meaningless. This is something you're going to go and change, but you will probably want to have some admin settings. So it's nice to be able to have a place to start with and then see how to actually use those admin settings later on in your module. Okay, all right, so we're good to go. Let's go and add a wee widget to our course. Okay, here we are. So add an activity, and we scroll down here, and there it is, wee widget. Okay, so we add that baby, and we're going to call our name, call our wee widget, we'll call it wonky widget, for lack of a better thing, wonky. Here we have an instance setting. So this is different to an admin setting because this is going to be different for each particular instance, for each particular activity that we add to our course page. Whereas the admin settings, that's common for all of the instances where it'll be the same thing. For example, the URL of our Facebook page or something like that. So some instances, let's call this instance setting thingy. Okay, and also part of this particular template is I've added completion settings, so it looks for grades, and if it's got grades, it'll give you the option of actually completing your activity based on grades or something like that. Okay, so let's go and have a look at that. Save and display. Okay, so you can see here we've got the description that we entered here. This is the setting that we pulled from the settings on the when we first installed the widget. This is the setting that we pulled just specific to this particular instance. You see we have a report section. This is also part of the template. We get a basic report, and of course, we don't actually know what sort of data you're going to be storing here. So at this stage, the report just pulls data about how many of your particular wee widgets there are in this course. Okay, and it's got export to CSV in there. Okay, so you can actually just once you figure out how the report system works, you can add your own reports here fairly simply. And a neat thing here is that these are determined by capabilities, these view and reports. So if you're a teacher, you can see these reports, but if you're just a bum student, you don't see this particular tab. Okay. Elton, who's here, he'll probably recognize a lot of this because it's very similar to a mod that we made for him. And in fact, this template is largely based on the mod that I made for Elton. Elton's doing a keynote later on, so be sure to watch that. Okay, one last thing I want to show you then, let's just get into the code just a wee bit, and then I'll throw the floor open for questions. Okay, so this is the code for our Wii widget. And you can see all the things like we had new module before have been replaced with Wii widget, so that's good. That's working. You'll see here the globals in action. Here's the page global. That's working good. You'll see this is an event declaration. That's good. And yeah, here is where we get the admin setting here. Some admin setting. We pull that from $config. We get our config here. I put here. I actually pull that from I set up a constant for the name of our particular component, just so I don't make a mistake or type it wrong. I use a constant every time. But anyway, this is how you get config. If you want to get just an instance setting, get that from the module instance here, which is created at the top of the page. Okay, and later on we pass this admin setting and this instance setting. We pass those on to the renderer here. Okay. Echo renderer shows something, some admin setting. Echo renderer shows something. So in the renderer.php, I've actually got a show something function, which will actually then print something onto the screen. Okay, so you can see that the various things we talked about earlier on are actually in place here. I could probably start talking now, but it's just going to get complicated, and I think it's probably covered enough ground for many of you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to come back, and if there's any questions, please ask me some questions. We haven't left much time for questions, so I apologize for that. And I'm going to close screen sharing. Okay, we're back here. Okay, so yeah, I think we covered a lot, and I hope it wasn't over people's heads. I hope it wasn't under people's heads. But please feel free to contact me if you actually want more information about this stuff. There's actually going to be a much fuller course, a free course on Moodle Bytes, which Stuart and I are putting together based on this new template that I've got there. So I'll explain in more detail how the renderer works, or how to set up a scheduled task, or how to do some of those things. And later on, there's actually a much more detailed, in-depth course, but that'll actually be a commercial one. That's later on in the year. But there will be a free course for those people who just want to see how to use that new template. Yes, yep. Anne says a block module is a very simple module to start with. Yeah, I think a block module is good, and actually it's a good place to put, a very kind of small, limited functionality where you just want, a page which gives a summary of something. You don't really need, all the fluff that you get with an activity module. So a block's a good one. Also the Atto plugin, you get a lot of bang for your buck because it's right there on all the areas we have an HTML editor. And there's probably lots of functionality that still hasn't been added there. Justin, could you please talk about the Generico filter? In many ways, it gives non-developers a taste of adding new functionality in Moodle. Yes, the Generico filter. The Generico filter it's a Generico. I'll type it in here. So a Generico filter string, when you add it to a text area, looks a bit like this. Type equals, say, tabs. Like that. Okay, and this would so you can actually make templates which load JavaScript and CSS onto the page in question, and then it sounds a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of CSS, but in fact with a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of CSS, there's really not much you can't do these days. So you can have tabs or accordions, or you can have, in one case we've added a guy called Adam from Miyazaki here in Japan. He made an audio player which would play at 3 speeds, slow, medium, and fast. That was using a Generico template. I did consider doing a presentation on the Generico filter, but I wasn't game in the end. But yes, the Generico, look for that on the Moodle plugins database if you're interested, because actually without writing a plugin, you can get quite a lot of functionality into Moodle just by installing the Generico filter and writing a few templates. writing a few templates. I'm using templates a lot today, but a template in Generico, it's just a couple of text areas on the user interface in Moodle, so you don't actually have to get into any text editors or programmers text editors or IDEs or anything like that. And there's quite a few examples of Generico templates. Ooh, thanks, Hilton. That's good. Yes, I suppose I can just ping you to the. If I just show you something. Hang on a second. This is a demonstration course for the Generico filter, so you can actually see there some of the widgets or the templates that are pre-installed and ready to be used out of the box. And there's a little bit of information about how to write your own templates there. That's a demo course. It gets reset every day at about 9:30 or 10 Japan time, so close to the time that we started our presentation today. And so you can log in as an admin. The admin credentials are there on the top page, so you can go in there and go crazy and make your own templates and try them out and do stuff. And the next day it'll be just it's like Groundhog Day. The next day it'll be back to the beginning again, just how it was before you started. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point. In fact, one good way of doing it, Anne, is to get started on something with a text editor or something kind of slow, just to figure out how things work, and then move on to an IDE. There's a bit of a debate about which of those is better. I just find the flexibility of being able to use different machines and a fast thing is better than an IDE. But I do use an IDE when I have to debug or when I have to jump all over the source code and see what's happening in other places. What do you use, Anne? What's your IDE of choice? Eclipse, right. Good. Yes. I can see it strapped to your back everywhere you go. Your beast of burden. Okay. Well, I see there's probably I probably talked everybody to sleep, which is something I have a habit of doing. So it doesn't look like there's going to be any more questions. But if you want to get in touch with me, please contact me via email or over Twitter, and I will reply to you. Or come along to Poodle.com. Actually, just contact me via my email. That's probably better. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. Fascinating presentation. I don't think I'm going to be writing code anytime soon, but it's good to have an insight as to how the plugins are put together. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Inside will be up there for everyone to download if they want to. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much.